What's up, guys? Anna here with my dog, Clark. Hey. And this is my production breakdown of Lows and Lies. Benny is also here. Let's get started. Before I get into logic, I actually wanted to show the original recording of just the idea for this song. This was recorded back in 2023, where I was just riffing on this chord progression and trying to come up with like transitions between the chords. Not very good in this version. Obviously, I got a lot better with it as I figured out what I wanted to do, but for the sake of showing you where it started, this is it. So, you know, it kind of maintained a lot of that vibe to it, at least as the song kind of progressed. But so when I went to record this, though, acoustic guitar, wasn't really feeling it, especially after I wrote the lyrics. They're kind of pissy, like many of my songs. So we switched over to electric guitar for this one. So this was recorded directly into my audio interface. What I like to do is I do 2 takes of it, and then I do a pan right, hard right, and a pan hard left. And that just fills out the sound, gives it more depth, gives it more dimension. At least in my experience, that's what I've found. And so you can kind of hear this was just played on a Telecaster, my white Telecaster hanging up on the wall. And, you know, threw in some distortion, threw in some tape delay, and obviously put an amp on it because I was directly plugged into this. I wasn't running through an amp or anything when I played this. So here is the electric guitar part that's setting the bass of the song. That's the same as similar to the acoustic version I just sent. So that builds the base of the song. Now the other thing is, I am a drummer. You can see my drum kit behind me. Unfortunately, I do not have the equipment to really record that well at this point in time. And so to get by, I just kind of use MIDI to make my drum tracks. This is what I would play if I were playing it on the kit, though. You know, I was feeling kind of a more Latin-y samba groove. You know, so I played this kind of stuff in jazz band, and so it didn't feel right to just do like your basic, you know, rock beat. Kind of boring. I wanted it to be a little more spicy than that. So I went with a Latin feel on this with, you know, rim clicks and everything. This is what it sounds like. And then to add a little bit extra to it, I added claps and tambourine on this. Always fun to add a little bit of auxiliary percussion in it. And then towards the end of the song, for the last chorus, it always seems good to switch the feel of the drum part just a little bit, especially if you're wanting to make it a little bit bigger sounding. And so in this case, I switched over to the ride cymbal, and instead of doing the snare clicks, I did, you know, just a regular snare hit in order to just beef up the sound a little bit more. And then obviously went harder with the fills. You can kind of see by the MIDI track there that there's a lot more going on. So I'll let you listen to that. And then in addition to that, I added some bongos and tambourine. Tambourine comes in right at the electric guitar solo in the middle, and then bongos just come in for the end. So, fun fact on the tambourine, I set off my alarm with this on accident. Got a glass break sensor in here, and it sounded a little bit too much like glass breaking when I was recording it. All right, so to get away from the percussion a little bit, let's go to the pad on this. Always like to throw in a pad. I am a proponent of pads being more felt than heard. That's just personally my taste. I did this kind of sparkly, mysterious kind of sounding. It's the Autumn Haze, or sorry, it's the Alchemy synth in Logic. And I put in some automation here to kind of help with the fade in, fade out, add that movement to the track. You can see I did that on the electric guitar too. I wasn't originally planning on having those stops in there. So to listen to that together. And it is kind of a building pad. I really like that effect in this particular song because there felt like there needed to be a lot of movement in the track. Now, to add a little bit more to the sound, I also did this tremolo guitar, just long sustained chords. What I like to do on my background guitar, though, is I do different voicings and I pan them hard right and left. So this is your first voicing. Turn it up a little bit. And then you add the second one. So you can kind of hear that. There's slightly different voicings on that one. And then same thing on this additional part. I added just for, you know, I took this out for that section where the electric guitar drops out, and then we come back in with this additional part. So if you want to hear all together. Not sure what's going on with that one, probably the automation. Yeah, you get like a more rounded out sound by doing that. And again, different chord voicings, pan hard right, hard left. I've got, you know, 4 different versions of the same chord in this song to kind of fill out the sound. Now, I also have this little synth in here. Kind of lines up with the overall feel of the song. All of that together. And toward the end. All right, now let's get to vocals. So what I like to do on my vocals, and again, this kind of depends on what you're going for in the track, but what I like to do with my vocals is you want duplicates. So when I do these duplicates, this is all this, just the main vocal re-recorded multiple times. And what I like to do is I have one main vocal in the center that's a little bit louder than the other vocals, and then a hard pan to the right, hard pan to the left. So 2 separate takes. That's kind of the same justification as I use on the guitar. Just fills out the sound, makes everything sound wider, makes everything sound, gives it more depth. And so you can hear the main track here.
Southbound on 25, the wind at my back, I'm running dry on cheap gas and daylight. Tire rappers burning down the road, and I don't know where the road goes.
As a side note, I actually had to re-record these vocals multiple times because my Scarlett was giving me problems. It made it sound kind of, I guess, for like fuzzy, crunchy sound. I don't know. I think it was the preamps in the Scarlett. So I actually switched to an Audient after that, and that seemed to mesh a lot better with my voice. In addition to that, to add some additional emphasis just to the chorus, I do an additional duplicate there on this track. And again, pan hard right, pan hard left. And so that just helps fill out the sound just a little bit more. And again, for a chorus, you want it to sound like multiple voices, right? It makes it sound deeper and more full. So here's what they sound like.
This time, now that he's gone, I can finally breathe again.
Another thing that I do on some of these background vocals, not as much the main vocal, but on the duplicates, I do like to put a little bit different reverb on those. You know, I do just a slightly different, little bit more, I guess, longer reverb on just the duplicate vocals, just to like fill out the sound a little bit more. So now for the second chorus, I added harmonies to add something a little bit different, you know, make the second chorus just a bit more different. I also change up the melody a little bit, but the additional harmony that comes in here helps add a bit of contrast to the first chorus.
Now that he's gone, I can finally breathe again. Now that he's gone.
Same thing I do with the other vocals, pan hard right, pan hard left, get it a wide sound. And then for the end, I added an echoed vocal, and it also kind of goes into a low harmony because it didn't feel right to do the echo on every single phrase. So that sounds like this.
I can finally breathe again now that he's gone. I don't have to play pretend now that he's gone.
So you can kind of hear that. And then on this one, I actually didn't know what I was doing here, I'm not gonna lie. I'm surprised I still had just room. I had the default on Chroma Glow or Chroma Verb, but I added a chorus effect to this too, just this low harmony. And then this background vocal is kind of cool, just to add a bit more energy to that last chorus. Let me listen to these just on their own. Again, you can see everything is panned hard right, hard left. It's got duplicates of everything. I wanted it to sound kind of like grungy. So you can see I was crazy with the EQ here. All over, yeah, phone filter notch. I thought it sounded really cool for this song. Again, these are kind of buried, so, you know, that's just there to add a little extra something, extra little spice to that last chorus. But yeah, I think it all sounded pretty cool, so all the vocals together for that end.
He's gone. I can finally breathe again now that he's gone. I don't have to play pretend now that he's gone. I can wait to start again now that he's gone. Now that he's gone.
The other vocal part I have in here is this. I just literally named him Ah. This is buried. This is a very subtle thing, but when I was listening back to this track as I was working on it, I kept hearing this and I was like, damn, I gotta put this in there. And just to see how it feels. And so these are recorded on an iPhone, just into my notes app, exported off into my computer. That was because I was working on this while I was traveling. Just threw them in there and kind of leaned into the lower quality sound. Again, it's buried. It's a vocal that's really deep in the background just to add movement. So what I'm doing here is, obviously all of these are different notes. I can't sing two notes at the same time. So I did that top one, and then that one is panned hard right. This is a different note. Pan that one hard left. Same thing here. Again, it's just a block chord. And so yeah, all that does is it's adding a bit of extra movement so you can hear it in context with the song. So I thought I added a little nice touch to that. Now, the other thing I threw in here, and I've never done this on a song before, but it felt fitting for this particular song, is this like whooshing noise. You can listen. It's a pressure release. This is just a sound that's built into Logic. Depending on what was being transitioned between, it goes either up or down. In this case, this one went down.
Count my blessings, running high down.
Yeah, that one's really, really subtle, but this one, you kind of hear how that gives it some movement into that first verse. Now to get to the guitar, because this is fun. I'll start off with Chris's tracks. I really can't speak to his stuff too much. He did a phenomenal job on this track. He does a great job on every track I have him on, but this one's just like, oof, just perfect. Nailed it. I'm pretty sure he recorded this while visiting his dad or something like that, and it was not on his guitar, it was on his dad's guitar. And so we only had this one take, and he did this just to get an idea down so he could keep working the song while he was out. And he sent it to me and I threw it in here and I was like, whew, that's like 99% there, dude. That is solid. And so this is actually the original take. There were a couple notes I think he fluffed in here that I tweaked with just Melodyne. Very, very easy. Again, very, very little of this has been edited outside of just, you know, your normal effects. If you wanted to know what he did for this, you'd have to ask him, but you know, added some effects here. I got this, you know, kind of a clean amp, but again, he did his own stuff when he was recording this. So the raw track, I guess, sounds like this. So you can tell, obviously, that's not just what a straight plugged in guitar sounds. Like he was running through an amp as well. So I added some additional effects to it just to make it a little bit more grungy. Yeah, so you hear that difference. And then we'll come down to his bass part. He did great on this. He's not a bass player, but he kicked ass on this. And so there's a lot of fills in that bass part as well, and I made sure that those popped out of the mix a little bit when they showed up there. I really like bass fills. I think they're kind of slept on. And then to get to my guitar part, I was not planning on playing lead on this track at all. But here we are. So this was me screwing around. I was just trying to get an idea down to send to Chris to kind of give him an idea of the feel that I was going for. And I sent it to him and he was like, actually, this is like perfect. Let's leave it in there so you can hear it. I got a mini, tweed kind of crunchy amp on there. And then I duplicated, I think I just cut and pasted a little bit of Chris's guitar part just to go underneath it. It's a little bit lower in the mix. It's still obviously very present, but... So there you go. And then for the last chorus, I did this weird kind of tape delayed to hell and back guitar part just to kind of add just a little bit extra rhythm. Again, this is buried. It just is another thing to fill out the sound. Add just a little bit of like different feel to the track at this point. Apparently just use the default there. You can see the tape delay. So the last thing here, I gotta give my dad a shout out on this little bell sound. Originally, this was not in there, obviously. I didn't have this idea. Well, not my idea at all. But my dad was kind of getting sick of the guitar part just being, because it's super repetitive, right? It's doing just those 3 chords over and over and over, right? So my dad was getting kind of sick of that sound in every section of the song, so he didn't really give me an idea initially on what to do about that. He just said, I'm not really feeling that. And I was like, okay, I'll maybe like think of something else maybe that can play that part. I'm doing stuff on the low string of the guitar, and so I was like, well, maybe I can do something that mimics that sound and kind of go on top of it, take the place of the guitar at certain points, especially in the first verse. I do that. So he was driving back from the doctor or something, I think, and he heard a song by Madonna. I want to say it's Dress You Up in My Love, and she's got this bell kind of sound in there, and he sent it to me and he was like, well, maybe try something like that and see how that feels. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever, I'm down to try anything. If it doesn't sound good, you just delete it, right? But it actually ended up being pretty cool, and I think it was a really good suggestion. And so I have the Alchemy sound in this. I did Magic Lantern. It's kind of a mallet sound. And I added some additional effects to it to make it kind of like a fuzzier, kind of gritty sound. And so you've got Silver Bourbon here, and I got clip distortion on it as well. And this is what it sounds like. It's kind of got a little bit of a crunchy, but gritty sound in there. And you kind of see how I did this on the verse.
Southbound on 25, the wind at my back, I'm running dry on cheap gas, daylight, tire rappers burning down the road.
It takes the place of that guitar part. Shout out to my dad, great suggestion.
Don't know.
So now let's listen to the end, because I freaking love Chris's guitar part. His outro on this is just killer. I love it.
Now that he's gone.
one fun fact about this ending is I was not planning on having this fade out like that. Interestingly enough, I exported the track to send it to somebody and it was just a glitch in Logic. Not really sure what happened. I was never able to figure out why it was doing it, but it cut everything out randomly except for Chris's last guitar part. And I was like, hang on a second. There's a lot of references throughout this song to, going off on your own, transitioning to, a new phase of life where you are off on your own for the first time in a while. And it felt really symbolic, actually, to have that guitar be the last thing that you hear. So everything else drops out, and then it's just that guitar part that ends. And so it's the lone musician, the lone player. There's one person left. And so, well, I'm kind of grateful for the era that Logic gave me because I think it ended up being really fitting and really fit the theme of the track. And it was a lot better than just doing the, big hit at the end. It just, that didn't, after hearing it like that is like, okay, the big hit at the end doesn't feel right. Let's just commit to this. That is my production breakdown on Lows and Lies. If you like this breakdown, let me know. I'm definitely going to do one more for Love and Loss, which is the title track off of my album. That will be coming out April 10th. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to this long video. It's longer than I thought it would be, but yeah, it is what it is. So see you in the next one.